The top story this hour: U.S. pledged to provide humanitarian assistance to the war-affected people in Amhara region. Citizens call for further coordinated offensive to curb TPLF aggression in Amhara and beyond. A very warm welcome to Addis News Hour. I'm Solomon Danye. Thanks for joining me. U.S. Ambassador to Ethiopia says her country is committed to providing humanitarian assistance to the war-affected people in Amhara region. Ambassador Gita Pasi, along with USAID Assistance Director for Humanitarian Affairs Sarah Charles, held discussion with President of Amhara region on current affairs. Kasan Chanesmo.
The TPLF has recently launched fresh attacks on Amhara and Afar regions on top of plundering property and starving children, mothers and the elderly to death. A large number of people are now fleeing to other areas, in addition to those displaced by the ongoing war that has been waged in various war-torn Gondar zones by the terrorist group. After having a brief discussion with Amhara region President Ilikal Kafala, United States Ambassador to Ethiopia Gita Pasi said her government is committed to providing humanitarian assistance to the victims of the war. According to the ambassador, victims of the war in the Amhara region are in dire humanitarian conditions.
We are hoping that there will be some sort of discussion, settlement, cessation of hostilities. We are coming to Amhara was overdue. I should have come a long time ago. We've given up over several hundreds of millions of dollars to Amhara over decades, and we work in many, many areas. Even some of the internally displaced people said they knew of AID projects, in the places that they came from. We have a commitment to all people in Ethiopia, regardless of where they are, where they're from. If they're in need, we're with them.
Sarah Charles, humanitarian assistant for the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, on her part announced that she was concerned about the suffering caused by the war in Ethiopia. As to her, most IDPs said they needed to return to their village and need support. She said her organization is committed to increasing air support to those affected by the war in the occupied territories of Amhara state.
I traveled to Ethiopia this week with the hope of getting up to Tigray and also coming to Amhara. I'm very honored to be here in Bahir Dar today. While we've been here, as the ambassador said, we were able to meet with a number of newly displaced women and small children. Many of them have been displaced even in the last month. They described for us fleeing in the night with very little, coming here to Bahir Dar, finding the generosity of neighbors and families, but very difficult conditions. Not enough food, not enough shelter, not enough water and sanitation assistance, and fear for their children. They all described wanting to return to their home in Amhara and needing support while they're here. USAID, the U.S. government, has long worked in Amhara. We have many partners that are here. And one of our goals while we've been here, is to talk to a number of those humanitarian partners about scaling up assistance to the Amharan people. We are very concerned about Ethiopians that have been caught in conflict, displaced by conflict, wherever that might be. And we are committed to scaling up assistance in Amhara to support those civilians caught in conflict.
During the occasion, Amhara Region Chief Administrator Dr. Ilikal Kafala informed the delegation about the atrocities and looting of civilians that have created multiple problems in areas invaded by the TPLF group. The Chief Administrator has called on the international community to provide humanitarian assistance for innocent civilians displaced by the invasion of the terrorist TPLF clique more than ever.
The Ethiopian National Defense Force has made successful airstrikes against TPLF's training center. Current issue fact check has stated TPLF's training center has been the target of airstrikes today. The site used to be the E&F's training center before being appropriated by the TPLF to undertake military training for its illegal recruits, the fact-check platform indicated. The site targeted by the attack is also serving as a battle network hub by the terrorist organization, it is indicated. It is to be recalled that armament stockpile of the terrorist group was successfully targeted during previous airstrikes by the National Army. The South Gondar administration calls for further coordinated offensive to curb the TPLF aggression in the Amhara and adjacent Afar region. The head of the administration calls upon all Ethiopians to battle against the terrorist group. Abtam Ashagri had the details.
Ever since the TPLF insurgents stepped in Amhara and Afar regions, they opened an open attack on civilians and their properties. Talking to TV, South Gondar Administrative Yega Sisai said the Ethiopian National Defense Force, along with the Amhara Special Force and other security forces, have launched an offensive to demolish the TPLF gangs in South Gondar. The TPLF mafias have undertaken mass looting and gross human rights violations in the region.
The TPLF mafias are working to achieve three objectives. Firstly, they are striving to disintegrate Ethiopia. Secondly, they are working to disgrace the people of Amhara and Ethiopians. Thirdly, they are looting and accumulating resources. These are the TPLF's objectives.
Some TPLF cliques are also disseminating improper information to young Tigrans to expand the recent conflict as well as to participate them in the conflict.
The TPLF mafias are misinforming Tigrans that they are liberating various areas which are against the fact on the ground. They told Tigrans the TPLF forces controlling Bahar Dar, Addis Ababa and Gondar, even they are in North Wallo. We are practically assuring aid from TPLF surrenders. They are expertise by black propaganda.
Despite continuing their play, the TPLF mafias are orchestrating various human rights violations as well as other wrong deeds in state of Amhara and Afar.
They propagate to negotiate with the federal government, but they are committing war aggression in the state of Amhara and Afar. Even they are expressing themselves as wrongly treated. They are masterminded elements for all devilish acts in Ethiopia. By the way, they are undertaking double-standard characterization. We Ethiopians are all informed what they are doing. Only few individuals confused about the matter. I hope they will know it soon.
Further efforts are needed to demolish all war aggression of TPLF mafias in state of Amhara and Afar, Yirga remarked.
There is a manifestation of the unholy alliance between TPLF and some external agents. Egypt and Sudan conducted joint military drill came last Tuesday following TPLF's heavy losses in the conflict in northern Ethiopia. The Egyptian army disclosed that a joint military drill was conducted last Tuesday involving Egyptian border troops and Sudanese military. In the following report, Aysentai Tamrak.
The joint military maneuvering between Egypt and Sudan is not a new phenomenon. Egypt has been signing military agreements with all states bordering Ethiopia, and the recent one came after it failed to maintain its diplomatic moves over the $5 billion GERD project being built on the Abai River. Egypt doesn't only want to preserve its colonial-era water monopoly over the Blue Nile. but also shows strong desire to remain a dominant power in the region, and it knows the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam project will inevitably shift this power balance in the region, making Ethiopia an emerging power in the Horn of African region. That's why Egypt has left no stone unturned to stop Ethiopia from finishing what's said to be Africa's biggest hydropower dam upon completion. In the course of events, Egypt has failed in the GERD trilateral negotiation over the past 10 years. Tracing back in the last 60 or more years, no Egyptian president has failed to threaten Ethiopia over the use of Abai River, which is Ethiopia's gift of God. The incumbent Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is no different. As Egypt understood Ethiopia takes the dam as existential project, it has resorted to strengthen its decades-long futile act of destabilizing, weakening and dismantling Ethiopia. One obvious way to attain this is through backing the terrorist groups in Ethiopia. Outstanding instances of this can be explained with Egypt's backing of the TPLF when they were fighting the Derg regime and the secessionist OLF when it was fighting against the TPLF, and now backing the TPLF itself again only because the TPLF wants to dismantle Ethiopia. However, now the reality on the ground in North Ethiopia is against the evil wishes of Egypt or TPLF. The TPLF is losing control of its holdings in Amhara and Afar regions as the Federal Army confronted it with counterattacks. Besides, the Ethiopian Air Force has destroyed TPLF's major military bases and weaponaries in Mekelle. This has given Egypt a clue that its Trojan horse, TPLF, is now unable to move forward to dismantle Ethiopia or at least topple Abiy Ahmed's government. This is in fact a joint vision of Egypt and TPLF propagated through Egypt media, as Getachew Radda, TPLF spokesperson, said.
Our relationship with the OLA, but we are ready to work with anyone.
Another proof of the joint vision is that while the Sudanese army is still deep inside Ethiopian territory and TPLF continues to ravage Afar and Amhara, Egypt says nothing. Despite this joint vision against Ethiopia's will to prosper together using a transboundary river, Egypt's strategy should shift from manipulating agents like the TPLF to transforming its old tactic of threatening Ethiopia. Then, the recent military drill with Sudan armed forces is a manifestation of that. Perhaps a major takeaway is that Egypt's appetite to make joint military drills or signing military cooperation with Ethiopia's neighbors comes as Ethiopia's GERD is close to see a major breakthrough. For example, in May, April and June 2021, just before Ethiopia was about to announce its second filling of the GERD's reservoir, Egypt pulled Sudan into a military drill, and now the GERD is expected to start initial power generation with its 2 units in few months' time. This motivated Egypt to drag Sudan to another military drill, but the recent joint drill might be a little different because now there can be powers that have stood with TPLF and against the 115 million Ethiopian population.
It's a very dangerous situation because Egypt is not going to be able to live that way, and they'll end up blowing up the dam, and I said it and I say it loud and clear, they'll blow up that dam. And they have to do something because they could have stopped it. They should have stopped it long before it was started. I said, how do you let it get built and then you say they have a dam?
The European Union recently summoned to discuss a resolution on Ethiopia to impose sanctions but ended in a deadlock. What does the international law say about passing a resolution against a sovereign nation? To reflect on the issue, we have invited lawyer Fasil Sleshi over the phone. It's good to talk to you, Mr. Fasil.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Solomon.
Good. Can any organization like the European Union pass resolution on a sovereign nation? Isn't it a violation of international law?
Thank you again. As you have said, the international organizations such as AU cannot deliberate upon a matter which is within the exclusive jurisdiction of a domestic, matter. Mm-hmm. So this is strictly against the very principle of non-intervention as it has been provided in the UN Charter. Therefore, countries are territorial integrity and political independence is strictly prohibited. It is an inherent rights of a state to deal with its own domestic affair. So this amounts to the act of the European Union to deliberate upon the sovereign matters of a state is total transgression of international law.
So it's to be recalled that the Ethiopian government expelled 7 humanitarian workers for overplaying their role as humanitarian workers, and the UN openly criticizes the move. Does the international law allow the UN to force Ethiopia receive them back?
No, it doesn't have any right to enforce a foreign a sovereign state to work with foreign diplomats who are working against its domestic laws. So if a country cannot expel people who are working against it, so this is under international law, a country is not a country if it is not able to expel people working against its interest. Therefore, it is within the international law that we call it persona non grata, that if a certain diplomat is not abided by the law of the country in which he or she is deployed, he could be expelled automatically without even giving any reason of expulsion. This is a very known and old international practice and law that a persona non grata is stipulated even under international law of international relations. So it is very clear that you can expel.
Good. Mr. Fasil Sleshi, thank you for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you for having me to Solomon. Good night.
ጎሬ ብሎ የተሰየመበት ምክንያት በዚህ በኩል ጎሬ አሁን አስተዳደር ወደሚከደው ላይ ግቢ የሚባል ቦታ ላይ እዛ ላይ ጎራ ብሎ ጣዝማ አገኛሉ። ጣዝማ አገኝቶ ጎራ ብዬ ጣዝማ አገኘው ማለት ነው። በኦሮምኛ ግን ጎሬን ዳሙ አርገዴ ብሏል። ጎሬን ዳሙ አርገዴ ስል ጎሬ አሉት ይባላል። ሰርቦ አረዶ ይባላል። ይሄንን መጀመሪያ እንደዚህ ብሎ ያስወጣ ይባላል።
ኢትዮጵያ ላይ ከተማ የሚለው ቃል ራሱ ሲጀመር ከተመሰረቱ 6 ከተሞች ውስጥ አንዷ የጎሬ ከተማ
Welcome back. You're watching Addis News Hour. President Sahle-Work Zewde has bid farewell to outgoing Ambassador of Cuba, Vilma Thomas Ramirez, at her office. Ambassador Vilma Thomas expressed gratitude to the government of Ethiopia for the support she has been provided with during her 4-year tenure in the country. Ethiopia and Cuba have been enjoying partnership in various areas of cooperation since they started diplomatic relationship in 1975. Meanwhile, State Minister of Foreign Affairs Redwan Hussein bade farewell to the outgoing ambassador of the Republic of Cuba, Vilma Thomas Ramirez, on Thursday. The State Minister appreciated the long-standing and fraternal relationship between the peoples and the governments of the two countries. The outgoing ambassador has commended the relentless effort of Ethiopia reinforcing its ties with Cuba. Alula Taklamaram reports.
The diplomatic relationship between Ethiopia and Cuba, established in 1975, the two countries have been enjoying bilateral ties in various areas since the commencement of the diplomatic ties. Cuban ambassador to Ethiopia, Vilma Thomas, has been here in Addis to strengthen the long-standing relationship of the two nations. A farewell ceremony was organized to the outgoing ambassador, Vilma Thomas, for having completed her tenure in Ethiopia. The outgoing ambassador once talked to ETV English on how Cuba survived U.S. economic sanctions against it.
Despite all those difficulties, as you mentioned, for 60 years now, we have been able to resist and endure and develop. And we are very proud that although it has cost a lot, and it has been, 7 out of 10 Cubans have lived all their life under this blockade.
She also commended the relentless efforts of Ethiopia to lifting of U.S. sanctions against Cuba. Ambassador Vilma explained the Ethio-Cuban long-standing ties.
My stay here has not only been an opportunity for me to learn about Ethiopia, but also an opportunity to show more of Ethiopia to Cuba. Through different ways, through promoting more Ethiopia, through social media. Even during the time we organize every year Africa Day for Africa, a journey in Cuba. And the role of the embassy was to show a lot of Ethiopian culture during that commemoration. So we share it with Cuban media, with Cuban press. And in a way, we are also contributing to show Ethiopian culture to Cuba in this regard.
Speaking on the farewell ceremony, State Minister of Foreign Affairs Redwan Hussein noted the importance of cementing ties between the two countries with active economic, social and political engagements. He said the people and government of Ethiopia remember with gratitude the contribution of the people and government of Cuba during the fight against the barbarous invasion of Ethiopian territories.
This is Addis News Hour. Rival Sudanese protest leaders urged their supporters to remain peaceful on the eve of a critical day of demonstrations over the fate of the country's fragile transition to civilian rule. Opposing factions of the civilian umbrella forces for freedom and change, including a pro-military splinter group, have called for competing rallies Thursday. Gosham Elisosmo from France 24.
Sudan's anti-government protesters took the streets of Khartoum for days. They have been demonstrating against the transition to the civilian rule and for a takeover of power by the military. But now those backing the democratic transition will also be out the capital. The transition started when former leader Omar al-Bashir ousted after repeated protests. Those demonstrating in recent days say the government has failed to solve the many problems Sudan is facing, including the economic crisis.
وقاعدين هنا لحد ما حمدوك ده يشوف لنا حل يا يمشي هو يا يمشي وزراه يا تنتهي القصة.
الاعتصام هنا اعتصام سلمي واعتصام ما فيه أي حاجة واعتصام مشاركين فيه كل الناس. ونحن لما طلعنا لتغيير أفضل مو طلعنا لحاجة مؤسفة للدرجة دي. نحن الآن هسه ما في أي حاجة.
The government says that military figures and supporters of Omar al-Bashir are behind the protest movement, hoping to derail the transition process.
لقد تابعتم الأحداث الأخيرة في البلاد والأزمة السياسية الحادة التي نعيشها الآن ولا نبالغ إن قلت إنها أسوأ وأخطر أزمة تهدد الانتقال بل وتهدد بلادنا كلها.
The government says an attempted coup averted last month. Meanwhile, General Abdul Fattah al-Burhan, the head of Sovereign Council, since he is committed to the democratic transition. Earlier this month, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in his remark expressed his optimistic that Sudan can resolve the problem by itself it has faced.
Before we go, a quick reminder of our top stories. US pledged to provide humanitarian assistance to the war-affected people in Amhara region. Civilians call for further coordinated offensive to curb TPLF aggression in Amhara region and beyond. Well, that's it for the news from me, Solomon Danya, and the rest of the English team here in the studio. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.